Welcome to the Bad Girls on Business, the podcast that makes business more fun so you want to do more of it. Here are your hostesses with the mostesses, Jenny Bellinger, Virginia Muskies, and Michelle Nedelec.
Hello and welcome back to the very next exciting episode of Bad Girls on Business, the only podcast in the industry that is safe, sane, and consensual. The bad girls are as nice, naughty, or kinky as our guests allow, and we give them a safe word in case we get out of hand. It's meatloaf, because we would do anything for business, but we won't do that. I'm Virginia Muskies, the referral diva, here with my bad girls.
Jenny Bellinger, your direct sales dom, helping you whip your business into shape, and our good bad girl.
I'm Michelle Nedelec. I am your mistress in business, helping you get it up and keep it up. And of course, we're talking about revenue and profit.
And today, ladies, we are joined by one sexy beast. His name is Keith Haddrill, and he has been an avid student of human behavior and human thought processes his entire life. He's a certified master practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming, NLP, a certified coach, and a certified master hypnotist. He also holds multiple specialty certifications in the fields of hypnosis and NLP. He has entertained and enlightened thousands of audiences, including some of our very own personal audiences here locally, as Jenny B knows. And he has been around the world using humor to teach. And he specializes in enriching corporate cultures through captivating NLP-based presentations. Welcome to the dungeon, Keith Haddrill.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. It's exciting to be here. And that's the best reading of my intro ever. I have to say, I'm a little turned on right now, so that's good.
Well, we want you turned up, tapped in, tuned in, whatever it takes, baby, for a great interview. And I got to tell you, we were in the green room before we came in, and I suggested that this is really an interview that Michelle should grab onto because she shares a lot in common with you. So you guys are going to be able to geek out.
If it's all right with you, Virginia just said I get to grab you.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
I'm ready for anything. So
he's ready for anything. So yeah, I feel like that's a really great place to go. And then Jenny's got her background there in NLP. And, I'm just a wannabe at this point. So I'm just going to sit back like a fly on the wall. And not really, but I'm going to let you ladies, go ahead and take it. So Michelle, what question do you have for this?
We'll hypnotize you and program you. By the end of it, Virginia, you won't even know what happened to you. It'll be awesome. You're just going to feel good at the end of this. You're not going to know what happened.
So you're going to podcast roofie me? Is that what's happening here?
Exactly.
she's gonna cluck like a chicken from now on in every podcast.
Girl, if you could give me a roofie that would make me forget the last 13 months, that would be hot.
Based on my own experiences of having been hypnotized, I feel like that's a possibility.
Well, Katie and I have been talking about a potential barter arrangement, so maybe I can just have him erase some of my memory and we can just move on. But then,
we can do that.
Oh, God. Michelle.
We can do that. But first of all, I'd like to know what piqued your interest in the whole NLP world and hypno.
Wow, I could fill an entire podcast just talking about that. It really goes back to the fact that my family structure was a yours, mine, and ours, where I was the only ours that came about unplanned when all my siblings were quite a bit older. The youngest one besides me is 10 years older than me. So I had this unique position in which to observe the family and people around me. And for whatever reason, that led me to just always feeling almost like an outside observer to the world and just being really fascinated by the human mind and human behavior and what makes us tick. And I just had this kind of objective viewpoint in seeing the dynamics just within my own family. And as I grew up, I got more into it and I started learning about hypnosis, and then NLP came along and it just kind of all grew from there. A lot of it was just finding out answers to my own issues that I wasn't finding anywhere else. So I think a big part of it is that I've not only learned this stuff, I'm actually a living embodiment of what is possible of all the things that can be released and reprogrammed and retrained through hypnosis and NLP.
Nice. I love that. Well, and I think my next oldest sibling was 6 years older than me, and I so much so I had a plaque on my wall that said, "You observe a lot by watching." So
Yes.
is every family crazy, or just the ones that are being watched?
Everybody is crazy in their own way. The fact is that you cannot survive childhood without learning some crazy. And one person's crazy is another person's genius. There's one of my favorite lines from the movie Pirates of the Caribbean is they're doing this stunt and Orlando Bloom said, "This is either genius or madness." And Johnny Depp says, "It's amazing how often those two words are used to describe the exact same thing." So, one of the concerns I have about traditional therapies is that they try to put us in what is considered normal by society standards. And one of the things I like about NLP is that my values have no place in your model of the world. So what may be crazy to some people could actually be genius to others. Ask Thomas Edison or Ben Franklin or anyone else who's changed the world with crazy ideas. But I think what you're asking too, is every family crazy? I think what it comes down to is human dynamics. There's really no crazy or sane, right or wrong. It's really about differing models of the world. It's how we model reality and our place in the world that is reality to us, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So when you're working with people and you're talking, is there any particular area that you're focused on? Because I always love to ask people, at what point in life did you know you're especially kind of crazy enough to think that you could become an entrepreneur? So obviously I am a huge advocate of crazy. I love it. I embrace it. I encourage it in others. I bring it out in people that are afraid of it. Where is your area of expertise that you love working with people on this?
I ended up working with a lot of situational sadness because I'm not a licensed medical professional. I can't say the depression word, and symptoms of anxiety. I've had really good success, not only in my own path as self-patient working with my mentors and just working on myself, but in working with other people. And I've evolved in that to what it really boils down to is your self-limiting beliefs and what beliefs are really driving you. So for a lot of people, they expect an answer like smoking or weight loss or depression or anxiety or whatever. Really, what it boils down to is what is the belief system that you're currently operating in and how is it working against where you want to be?
This never fails, okay? Like our regular listener right now is like, okay, here's that time when Jenny's like, holy shit, this applies again. Because you're so right. I literally had one of my own aha moments just a few days ago when working with one of my other coaches about my pricing system and my pricing, the self-limiting beliefs I had around my own pricing for my coaching. And what ended up coming out was I now owe an apology to all of my current clients and to all of my former clients and to all of my future clients, because I was pricing myself saying, well, they can't afford X, Y, or Z. I was undervaluing them.
Yeah.
Oh,
that happens so often. It's so interesting. And Jenny, it comes back when we talk about in the Nexus, like check your biases, right? So it's always, I'm working with GV Freeman right now, and he is like, he does these little mini experiments, right? So he's like, well, just test it out, like A/B test it. Like, if you think if I do X, then Y will happen and I will feel terrible, then go ahead and check it out. And what's the worst that's going to happen? Oh, you'll feel terrible for what? 5 minutes. Okay. So just go ahead. And usually like 9 times out of 10, like the shit you anticipate happening never happen. Like I swear that like having to decline for Keith and be like, I just don't have the focus. It's not even a time thing. It's just, I don't have the focus to say yes. And I was like, he's going to hate me. Oh my God. And he's like, cool. Thanks for letting me know. I was like, shoot, so.
yeah, no. And those beliefs, like I didn't even know I had it. Now, I've been coaching since 2017, pricing myself since 2017, and we're recording this at the beginning of 2023. And so those beliefs, really can be under the surface for a long time thinking, oh, I'm good. And then I'm like, oh, no, I'm not.
Okay, so I have a question for Keith and Michelle here. So here's my question. So we often hear like all the limiting beliefs and the hidden beliefs and the subconscious beliefs and the below conscious whatever, and right, and like those motivators that keep us safe, right? Like, is it humanly possible to have a single subconscious belief that like makes us soar and thrive, and we just don't even know why? We're just awesome. We're like fucking awesome. And it's like part of the program, and we don't know that that's the program.
Yes.
No.
So here's my 3 or 4 part answer to that, and then Michelle can chime in as well. First of all, unfortunately, our firmware is survival based. So we have a natural tendency to think in terms of worst case scenario, be prepared for the worst. So the tendency is to write these subconscious programs to survive, to hide or be ready to fight or avoid, as opposed to reach out there and thrive. That's unnatural for us, to that primitive amygdala reptile brain that runs all that. The second thing is that our minds categorize, or they file things in terms of situation or context. So, for example, people eat the vast majority of their calories between the time they get home from work and the time they go to bed, because that's when they're in their bored space or they don't have something else driving them. So, and a lot of times it's just boredom. So I'm bored. It's after work. It's evening. I go to this folder that says, okay, this time of day, this situation. And if there's only one program in there, eat something. That's what you're going to do every single time. So it's always based on situation or context. So to answer your question, it is possible to hypnotize someone, a direct suggestion to ignore all other instincts and go out there and do this thing. And right before a football game for an athlete or something like that, that can work wonders. The sad part of it is that's not a permanent thing. That's a temporary direct suggestion. And as long as there are subconscious voices behind you or behind it going, yeah, I don't buy this. I have these needs, or this part of your mind needs this, or this part of your mind needs to feel safe here, all that's going to work against you. So that's kind of the sad truth about it. So it is possible, but what I much prefer to do is release all that baggage so that you're not walking against the current for everything that you want to do.
I agree absolutely wholeheartedly with everything you just said, and I'm going to take it from another directive, is I think we are all born with something awesome, amazing, phenomenal in us. I mean, you can't look at a little kid and not go, Bob Squishum, and they're adorable and they're wonderful. And that element of you is always there. It will never leave you. And that's more often than not why your friends love you, why people are attracted to you. You know, you look across a crowded whatever and you see their eyes, that thing will always be there. And the issue is the conditioning that we have on top says, that's bad, that's wrong, I'm too outgoing, I'm a slut, I'm a whatever that thing is that stops.
I'm a slut and I love it.
Right? It's like, and then he loved it going across the bar, you know it, and that's that little spark thing, right? So it's, that thing is always there, and being able to acknowledge it, use it in our favor is, to me, the biggest thing of how do you take that little nugget and grow it? Because when we see it sometimes, if depending on how we grew up, we will see it as bad and negative, and it's not. It's awesome and amazing.
You know, Michelle, you bring up a really, really good point. I'm so glad you did. I do one-on-one coaching, and a lot of times, most of the time now, it's executives. And I've had these executives turn into 5-year-olds in session. And one of my favorite moments is when we go back to some formative event. Like my first formative event that led to my belief structure started when I was 2 years old. And I didn't have a conscious memory of it. I had flashes of it, but that's about it. When we are kids, we are pure. We are perfect human beings. We are perfect little boys, little girls, and we are exactly as we are supposed to be. But we are in a constant state of hypnosis until we are about 8 to 10 years old. That is why Santa and the Easter Bunny are easy sells. We just take it all in. Unfortunately, we take in other suggestions as well.
We take it all in.
We take it all in.
Yeah.
So when I do a release, a timeline release especially, I always make sure okay, we had an abusive dad come home drunk or something like that, and little girl sitting on the floor. And we heal that scene. We take, okay, dad, and then what about mom? Yeah, mom didn't balance. Mom wasn't strong enough. And so there's this issue. So we take care of all of this. We remap this model of reality that happened. And then I always make sure to have the client go back and hug that little boy, that little girl, that child, and appreciate their pureness, appreciate their perfection, and say anything that they want to that child and hug them with all the love that they needed in that moment. And quite often the child will then grow up to catch up with the client. But I get shaky and chills just talking about it because it is such a beautiful moment, because we tend to abuse ourselves. Incoming cat, if you hear a meow. We tend to abuse ourselves.
I thought that was Michelle flirting with you, Keith. I was like, he's so sapiosexual, like Jenny and I are just raunchy, but Michelle really digs your brain. So
I could tell that immediately. Yeah. So
well, and on this conversation, a lot of times we did work that was in utero. So mom's pregnant with the kid. All of a sudden she's flooded with anxiety. The kid gets anxiety based on certain situations. Everybody's going, that can't happen. And it's like, yes, it can, because that's when you develop your emotions, and that's how you develop your emotions. So people will say things like, oh, I always get anxious when blah happens, right? When a dog barks, I always get anxious. Well, yeah, I can see that, but that's got nothing to do with you or this dog, right? And it's being able to see those patterns. And the issue is we have so many of these patterns. And it's like, okay, well, I've dealt with this. It's going to be gone, right? Well, not so much so. And therein lies the
honestly find myself completely insufferable, Like, it's like, and I'm not really sure, like, there's this moment, and Keith, I'm sure you've seen it, right? Like, so you're working with somebody, and it's sort of that red pill, blue pill moment when all of a sudden, like, you step back, and then you're like outside yourself, looking in yourself, going, what the fuck? Like,
right.
Why did you think that? Why would you tell yourself that story? What is that about? Why did you, right? So it just, and then you're like bipolar all the time. Like, I wasn't feeling a thing. Where did that come from?
You, but she means her.
The generic you. Yeah. So the interesting thing, I read a book, I think it was in The Healing Code by Alex Lloyd, where he was talking about a woman who she thought her sister was the favorite sister because her sister got ice cream and she didn't get ice cream. And the idea was, like, her sister finished her dinner, so her sister got ice cream. She had not finished her dinner, so she did not get ice cream until she finished her dinner. She actually did get the ice cream, but she stopped at, my sister got ice cream and I didn't get ice cream. And her whole life went to hell in a handbasket because she was the inferior daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we build entire stories around just a few data points. I call it kind of like when you look up at the sky and you see 3 stars and they've made this whole constellation out of 3 stars, right? And and we attach meaning to these things. And then we have what's called confirmation bias. So you only see that which supports your belief, and you tend to filter out anything that would refute that belief. And these belief structures are nefarious. We don't realize how they are impacting our lives every single day.
Well, yeah, I mean, hello, it completely impacted, my business for 6 years almost, before I finally was like, oh, okay, no, I'm going to price myself according to the value that I bring, not to what I think the market can afford. It's like, this is the value I bring, and the people who want that value will pay it, right? So it's, shifting that is an important piece to understand and make that shift forward. Because I think that is what I like about NLP. And I am not fully trained in NLP. I know just enough to be really freaking dangerous with
It's
it.
always fun.
Right. What I like about it, what fascinates me about it is that it does allow you to move forward. It's not like, we already brought up, traditional therapy, which doesn't always move people forward. It can sometimes help them, process things that they've gone through in a traditional way, but it doesn't really move somebody forward the way NLP can. And I really love that. So is that something, for you, have you found that to be a benefit or how has it benefited your clients to be able to move forward like that?
My favorite thing to hear at the end of a session, and I've heard it many times, is, wow, you just did more for me in an hour and a half than my counselor did, and I saw him or her for 3 years. And it had to have been at least 20 times over the last 10 years I've heard those exact words, at least that. And that, I don't want to disparage any other discipline. They're in their own model of the world, right? But I can tell you that in my journey of finding answers, I did all the traditional routes and, talked about mom for years. And it may have felt better. It may have given me some conscious level answers, logical level answers, but it never really released it. And the power of NLP, first of all, NLP, basically, it's our model or our map of reality in any given hunk of reality or chunk of reality. But like if you look at the state of Missouri, you say, I've got a detailed map of Missouri. Okay, what's the detail? Well, it shows you all the roads. Okay, well, my map shows topography, all the different elevations. Well, my map shows the rivers and waterways. Well, my map shows, congressional districts or something. So these are all maps of the exact same reality, but they focus on very different things. So two people, going back to our all families crazy, these families build and generationally propagate these models of the world, these maps of reality. And they feel very real to us. I worked with a kid who had a phobia of frogs, just a debilitating fear of frogs. This was very real to him until we went back to that moment when a frog landed on his head when he was 4 years old. And we looked at this reality in a whole new way. And I think we turned the frog into a balloon and we just did these different things. And the fear just went away. And that belief structure then becomes a house of cards and it just kind of all falls. And actually, probably another better metaphor would be a chain of dominoes, because when you knock that first big domino down, all the similar dominoes will fall as well. Now, here's kind of an interesting case because so he was 4 when the frog landed on his head. And then we go back up the timeline and, okay, fear gone. Oops, it's back. I'm now 14. Okay, what's new? Well, now I'm by the pond and all the frogs are croaking. Okay, so we've added sound to it. So we've added another brick to the illusion of this reality. And so we take a look at that. So let's look at that. Are they about to attack you? No. Okay. Are they armed? No. Okay. What's really happening here? And we get to see it from a much more resourceful, objective viewpoint. And, we're talking about this in terms of individuals or families, but, this is a podcast, I think, for a lot of entrepreneurs, business people. These beliefs are nefarious in business. Like you've said, you're underpricing yourself. And that's your model, your belief structure. And there's probably some insecurity about, I don't know. And there's, like you said, devaluing them. And what does the market bear? Well, who's to say what the market bears? So, whether it's parenting or how you're doing in school or whether you're teaching others or you're a manager or an employee. I worked with an executive once and she literally said, every time the manager looks at me that way, I just know he doesn't approve of my report. He doesn't approve of what I've added to the meeting. I said, well, how specifically do you know that's true? So I just know. Okay, have you asked him about it? Well, no, I don't want to do that. It's like, okay, when are the meetings? Right after lunch. Okay, so he could be trying to hold in what the burrito wants to let out, right? Yeah, I mean, there are all these different ways to interpret these things. But Virginia, you beat me to it by like half a moment.
It's the
flirt thing.
On that, just because this is Bad Girls on Business, have you ever done any work in the kink world and sexual orientation, all that kind of fun stuff?
Yes, I have. I did some experimentation, and I hesitate to say this in the podcast because this was couples having issues, and it is possible to bring people to full orgasm just through hypnosis.
Uh-huh.
And so the first couple that I worked with for this, I gave her ever-increasing orgasms without ever touching her. It was all hypnotic. And then I gave him the power to, all he has to do is touch her shoulder and she'll go. And this will last for the rest of the weekend. Well, they had a 2-hour drive back home and he kept her going. It was a summer night in a convertible. He kept her going like the whole 2 hours. And then apparently they played for 4 hours that Saturday. And she never wore out, right? Because it was,
it was a hypnotic suggestion.
It was hypnotic suggestion.
Okay, Jenny and I.
The really funny thing is, though, what'd you say?
Jenny and I will be right over.
All right, you got it. The funny thing is they went to church that Sunday morning, and he went to put his arm around her, and she's like, "No."
Like, no touching.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious. Keith, I have a question, and then I want to ask you about your upcoming book and some things about corporate culture. But you and I have talked, like, one of my biggest things is, as you were talking about, like, and he released his fear of the frog, I noticed that I was like massaging my hand, like, and the more you talked about, like, and it wasn't about him having a fear. It was like, and then he had the fear when he was 14 and we released the fear. And then I was like, I literally think I broke my wrist. I think I sprained my wrist, rubbing my wrist, thinking about the thought of releasing a fear and what that actually means for a person on the back end of it and why we self-protect with that. Like, why is it so unnerving to think about, like, not being afraid anymore?
Because the number one goal of our subconscious mind is to help us survive in the best way possible. And as we go through life, our minds get divided into different parts. So, I was talking about how our mind kind of divides everything into context or situation. And in each of these situations, there's another part that kind of takes charge. So when the mind decides, okay, I'm in this situation, then that part takes over. And you may be you hear about two-faced people all the time, or you see someone act very differently when they run into old friends from high school than they do at work. Or you see people behaving very differently on LinkedIn than they do on Facebook. And that's not all about propriety. That is different roles that you're playing, these different parts. Well, these parts feel that they have a mission to protect you. And so if there is a part of your mind that is in charge of that fear, and we start talking about releasing that fear, that part's going to say, time out, wait a minute. That fear is really important. That is my whole mission in life, because as long as we can keep that fear, I can keep you safe from frogs, because we've decided that frogs are a danger to our survival. So the first thing that I have to do quite often is I have to reassure that part of the mind that, okay, I'm not here to chase you away. I'm here to give you exactly what you need, but in a much better way than you ever thought could be possible. If we could do that, do I have your permission to talk to you, and will you talk to me? Yeah. So the parts want to survive in order to help you survive. So there's quite often that. And I think there's also something to be said about what's familiar. Alfred Hitchcock said there is nothing more terrifying than the unopened door. If we have lived within a belief system, it's like I met someone who was recovering from their particular religion, right? They grew up in this religion, and I don't want to say which one it is, but very, very strict, very regimented. And she broke free from that, but it was the scariest, most uncomfortable thing ever. Even though logically she knew this just doesn't make sense to me anymore, it was still a very difficult thing for her to do. So there's that familiarity there.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind, it sounds really inane for some of us to think somebody's afraid of a frog. But if that was a poisonous frog, and they actually went into a coma from it, then you go, oh, well, if it was that kind of frog, then it totally makes sense. Well, to them, that is the kind of frog that they're dealing with. So it seems unrealistic, or it seems kind of frivolous to be afraid of those things. And worse, when it's us doing it, we really downplay it and go, oh my God, it is so stupid that I'm afraid of this thing, or I'm so ashamed of the fact that I'm afraid of this thing. So now we start coupling negative beliefs in with other negative beliefs to try and protect ourselves from telling other people about these things so that we kind of don't break.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Which in business is debilitating.
Absolutely.
Right? I'm embarrassed that I'm broke. I'm embarrassed that sales didn't go through. I'm embarrassed that I didn't say the right thing at the right time. So I'm not going to tell anybody. Therefore, I'm not going to get any better at doing sales or presentations or whatever the thing is.
Kind of like talking on the marketer's cruise, but that's for a whole other podcast. All right.
So kind of like that, yeah.
Kind of like that. So, Keith, you've got a book coming out, and we want to let people know about the book. What is, who's your audience for the book, and what will we learn when we dive in?
Well, it's interesting. Michelle just gave us a really good intro point to that, in the fact that she was talking about, we don't understand what other people are going through. We don't understand why this kid would be scared of non-poisonous frogs. It seems silly to the rest of us when it's very real to him. So I want to preface my talking about the book by bringing that up, because it is very real to him. It's silly to the rest of us, but for a 4-year-old boy, it was a scary thing, and he dealt with it as a 4-year-old boy. So where does the book come in? The book is about effectively communicating and hearing and understanding each other across the divides that our country is facing. Not just political divides, but generational divides, racial divides, intra-family divides, where parents and kids don't see eye to eye, or siblings may hate each other, or, like you said earlier, one sibling got the ice cream and the other didn't, kind of thing. And the book is all about bridging the understanding so that we can see at the very root level of how our minds work, where we tick at that subconscious level. We can understand, first of all, what biases are we bringing to the conversation and what's really going on with them. And I just worked with a client this past week. I'll be very vague as to when, so nobody can trace back who, but they found themselves in an altercation and they wanted to accept all the blame for it, even though when we revisited the scene, this was a place of work, and we revisited the scene, and so the other person really seemed to overreact. And the point of emphasis that I made was, okay, you don't know what was going on in their mind, but that reaction could not have possibly had anything to do with you in that moment. You just happened to be the millionth member to cross the bridge and win the prize of stepping on an emotional landmine. So the book is going to give tools to help everybody understand each other in that way. We're going to learn how we see others versus how we see ourselves, and why those are opposite perceptions, and that works against us to understand each other right off the bat. You said, who's the book for? Originally, it was going to be for managers, HR people, mid-level managers. And the reason that the talk that led to the book came out is because managers are seeing all the divides, the racial divides, the blue versus black, the red versus blue, all of the divides. They are infiltrating the workplace, and managers are just not trained to deal with the increase in conflict that is happening in the workplace, that quite often has nothing to do with the job itself, but it has everything to do with fundamental differences in these belief structures. So that's
I love
it.
that, because I think a lot of times management is like, oh, I'm just going to stick my head in the ground and I'll deal with this. Or everybody bring your problems to me and I'll help you deal with them. And meanwhile, it's like, have you asked them to talk to each other about it? They were both involved and they talk. So I'd like to echo the fact that I think that management gets promoted because they're good at something, not necessarily because they're good at conflict management.
Or people in general. And they don't always hide their head in the sand. The more damaging thing is when they hide their head in policy. I worked with someone recently who was a student and was a victim of zero tolerance policy. for grabbing another kid's backpack. And that's all he did. Now, I grew up a young boy in middle school, and we would tussle, we'd shove each other, and we'd laugh. It's how guys say hi as we punch each other in the arm. That's what we do. But zero tolerance just really messed him up. He was a kid that never, ever got in trouble, and suddenly he's in school suspension, serving this detention with frequent violators. So, and I see that in the workplace as well. There's zero tolerance policies. And I think there's a reason. I don't think anything should be absolute or black and white. In my ideal world, I'd love for everyone to understand just some of the tools that I'm going to put in the book to help us truly understand each other and really kind of resonate with each other on a case-by-case basis. I work with HR people all the time, and it frustrates me because 3 decades ago, human was a part of human resources. And now it's all metrics. It's all data. It's all this study, and it's compliance with this and compliance with that. And they're trying to make this IT approach to humans. And we just do not work that way, because each and every one of us has different triggers. We have different models of the world. We have different belief structures, and you just cannot throw data at the problem and expect it to all go away.
Todd Rose just published a book called The End of Average, and it really speaks to that, because he talks about the fact that average doesn't exist. There is no average pilot. There is no average direct sales professional. There is no average NLP practitioner. There is no average sized woman. There is no average size, right? And then they look at sort of if you take the average woman, well, the average woman is it has to do with the size of her head or the width of her shoulders or the width of her waist or whatever. And then if you plot that on a graph, you can get people that might be close to average, but their own unique profile has nothing to do with that, right? And so it's the same thing that we see going on in medicine right now, where it's everybody gets the same dosage, and so the trend in the high-end medicine is precision, right? Precision diagnostics, precision optimization. And it's really a shame that our HR and our cultures, our corporate cultures, have gone the route of averagization, if you will, right? You are going to meet the mean standard or you are bad. And so then you're above the standard or below the standard. And there are actually companies now, Keith, and I don't know where I read this, but I think it's actually in this book, where there are whole companies that have stopped interviewing people based on ACT score and your college, because that's what they would use to screen your grades, what kind of college you went to. And there would be these numbers. And they're starting to really look at hey, what's your aptitude and what's your experience, and looking at what is the cultural makeup of the human that we need to do this job, and what kinds of humans with what kinds of experience are appropriate. And it was an engineering firm that ended up hiring a pharmacist.
That's awesome.
To do this job, because the pharmacist possessed the experience and the culture and the attitude and everything, but his education meant that, and the guy rose to really high ranks in the company. So I think the work that you're doing is so super important, because we've got to move away from this. If we want same, then that's what AI and robotics is for. But humans require differentiation.
Well, and our skill set, statistics has proven this over the last 50 years now, that what we ask somebody isn't necessarily giving us the data we want. So we can show somebody a painting and say, do you love it? Do you hate it? And if they hate it, we'll take it away. Well, just because I hate it doesn't mean I'm not going to buy it. I mean, buy it because I hate it, because it evokes something in me, because it's what is that wakes up in me? So the question isn't, do you love it or do you hate it? It's, would you buy it or would you not buy it, to make the decision to leave it or not leave it in the art gallery. And when we look at stats like that, it makes it very, very difficult to run a human resources profile based on, have you checked the box? So yeah, this conversation, we could go on for ever.
We could.
I was just thinking that, yeah. Well,
you have all
let me add,
right? You're good?
Yeah, right. Let me add one quick thing to what Virginia was saying about the pharmacist. Is there's an added benefit to that in trying to think of the guy's name, Jay Abrahamson, maybe, who talked about bringing in experience from completely different marketplaces, completely different industries. And so chances are the pharmacist brought in new perspectives that the people there would have never thought of to begin with.
Right. And solved problems in totally unique ways that were outside the box and actually gave the company a competitive edge.
So that's why I'm so passionate about my book. I know we need to close up, but
because Michelle has kinky questions for you. We will put the link in the show notes and it'll be available. Whatever it is that you want us to share with people will be available there. So
okay, awesome.
Download excerpts or workbooks or PDFs or whatever it is that you want folks to have as soon as.
They can even make requests of what they'd like to see in the book or send stories or things like that that may end up in the book. If they want to contribute, that'd be great.
Excellent. All right, Michelle, proceed to the kinky questions.
Keith, I am going to give you some rapid fire questions. Are you prepared?
As prepared as I'll ever be. Let's put it that way.
If you have any questions, feel free to ask, of course. When it comes to your marketing, do you prefer domination or seduction?
Seduction.
When it comes to your networking, would you say you're an exhibitionist or a voyeur?
Exhibitionist.
When it comes to your leadership style, would you say you're a gentleman dom or a power sub?
Oh, gentleman dom, I guess.
When it comes to your team, do you prefer to be married or have mistresses?
Definition, do you want employees or 1099s?
Okay, I was looking to see where my fiance was and if she's out of range.
I hire my mistresses. Can I say that? Kidding.
I think definitely mistresses. Yeah, when it comes to hiring.
When it comes to entrepreneurship, do you prefer monogamy or polyamory?
Poly. I'm too ADD for monogamy in that regard.
Love it. You did awesome. Thank you.
Awesome.
I was worried I was going to have to look up things in the Urban Dictionary there for a minute. Just to...
So Keith, it's why we have Michelle as the innocent one among the three of us. So it's why we have her asking the questions because...
Saj, I can tell that, yes.
Jenny B, think about.
Absolutely. Keith, again, thank you. It has been our honor and our pleasure to get to hear from you and sharing your experience and your expertise with our audience. So we're so glad you're here. Thank you very, very much for being here. And to our listener right now, the one who's listening, if you heard everything that fell out of Keith's mouth and you're like, he is brilliant, I want more, then what you need to do is go into the show notes. And just in case you've never listened to a podcast before and you have no idea how to get to the show notes, grab your phone, click on today's episode, and then just scroll up a little bit and you'll see show notes right below our beautiful pictures. So grab that connection to Keith. We have the link to the book. We have the link to his website. We have the link to his social media. So that way you can find him on all the places where you want to connect with Keith in order to reach out to him and get more information. And of course, make sure you connect with us, the Bad Girls on Business, by checking out our website, badgirlsonbusiness.com. Each one of us has a wonderful gift for you on our profile at badgirlsonbusiness.com. So make sure you go check that out. Grab your gift from each one of us today. And don't forget to check for the Easter egg on our website, leading you to a little extra fun just from us. And stay tuned because there's another Bad Girls episode on its way.
Thank you for listening to the Bad Girls on Business podcast. Don't forget to check the show notes for any links mentioned in this episode and for additional contact information about the guest or our hostesses. If this show got you going, we'd love to hear about it when you subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Can't get enough of the direct sales dom, the referral diva, or your mistress in business? The Bad Girls have hidden their gift for you at badgirlsonbusiness.com. When you find the Easter egg, use the password BGOB to unlock your treasure chest of goodies.